Hello. I'm a woman in my late 30s living in Chicago. I'm divorced now, but just thinking about my ex-husband and his family still makes my heart pound and my hands tremble. My husband came to me a broken man after his business failed, but I was determined to take responsibility for him, to see us through it. He didn't seem to understand that. When I told him I was sending my own parents on a nice vacation, a trip I paid for, his mother called me. If you spend one more cent on your family, you'll divorce my son immediately. Still convinced her son was a high-flying success, she was the one who brought up divorce. It was music to my ears, and I immediately agreed. But the very next day, my husband grabbed his own mother by the throat. Here's the full story of how it all happened. Hello? Where are you? Kevin, where are you? Hello? Who is this? Ma'am, your husband can barely stand up, and he hasn't paid his tab. You need to come get him. Where are you? I'll be right there. For a long time, my husband, Kevin, was lost in a bottle. After his business collapsed, he had nowhere to go, yet he'd leave the house and just disappear, not answering his phone. I lived in constant fear that he might do something terrible to himself. His friends had all abandoned him, and I think he felt ashamed and uncomfortable being at home. Under my watch, he'd either lie about where he was going or just vanish without a word. When that happened, I'd have to go out and search all the places he might be, my mind racing until late into the night. Kevin hadn't always been a business owner. He was originally a corporate guy, working a 9 to 5. I, on the other hand, had only graduated high school and had started my own small business, which is how we met. I started small, without a proper office, but my business began to do well. I wasn't making a fortune, but I earned a steady, reliable income. With the money I saved, Kevin and I were able to get married without any help from our parents. I had a good relationship with his parents, and Kevin and I were happy. I was content with our life. That is, until he decided he wanted to start a business. You know, maybe I should try starting a business like you, he said one evening. I'm sick of waking up at the crack of dawn every day. If I had my own business, I could set my own hours. It's a lot harder than a regular job, Kevin. Come on, watching you, it looks pretty easy. Kevin's commute from our apartment to his office downtown was long, so he had to be up by 6 a.m. to eat breakfast and leave. I understood that waking up that early every single day is not easy. My own work hours were more flexible, so I could see why he might think my life was more relaxed. But I had my own struggles. I had employees who didn't always share my work ethic, and when sales were down despite all my hard work, I had to rack my brain to figure out what was wrong. The responsibility of having a staff was immense, something words can't fully describe. So, when he made that comment, I felt a little hurt. Still, I figured it was just an offhand remark and let it go. But then he actually did it. After joking about it for weeks, he came home one day and announced he had quit his job. What do you mean you just quit? Without any kind of plan? You know how long you've been with that company. I just want to take a month or two off. I need a break. Then, I'll start slowly thinking about a business plan. I understood his desire for a break, but I really didn't want him to go into business. It had taken me years of trial and error to find stability, and I was deeply anxious watching him view it so simplistically, with no guarantee of success. His parents were worried sick too. His mother would call me, her voice filled with concern. I can't even look you in the eye. What's our Kevin doing? He's fine, Mom. I'm at the office right now. Oh, that's right. What was he doing when you left? I tried to wake him for breakfast, but he said he wanted to sleep in, so I let him be. That boy never gave me a moment's trouble when he was young. Why is he putting me through this now that he's a grown man? Lazing around at home, not earning a dime. Don't you dare cook for him. Let him starve. My mother-in-law apologized to me profusely and promised she would come and give him a piece of her mind if he kept it up. To be honest, since I was still working, our finances weren't in trouble. But I couldn't help but worry as I watched my husband sleep late every day with no plan for the future. After nearly 3 months of doing nothing, Kevin excitedly told me he and a friend were starting a business together. What kind of business? A beverage distribution company. Listening to him, it sounded like he had actually put some thought into it. After he told me his plan, he suddenly became incredibly busy. He said they needed to lease a warehouse to register the business and had to deal with a mountain of paperwork at the tax office. He was busier than he'd ever been at his corporate job. He was out on weekends, and when he was home, he'd come in so late I barely saw him. But he kept me in the loop, explaining the business in detail and even taking me to see the warehouse they'd leased. He asked me to wait until the office was fully set up, and then one weekend, he took me there. This is it. The office. What do you think? It looks great. Very clean and professional. Yeah, right? To save money, we got the desks, couch, and table secondhand. But I'm really confident about this, Emily. Don't worry. I know this is my first time, but Mike has started several businesses before. He said he knows this industry inside and out. He was overflowing with confidence. I decided that since he'd already started, it wasn't right for me to keep showing my anxiety. So, I threw my support behind him and his new venture. And for a while, it seemed to be the right decision. His business took off almost immediately. I had been prepared for him to struggle for at least a year. But within a few months, he had found his footing and was making serious money. It was so successful, it was almost unbelievable. His parents were thrilled, and I finally felt a sense of relief. The problem, however, became the condescension from my husband and his mother. When her son quit his job to start a business he knew nothing about, my mother-in-law had been apologetic. But once the money started rolling in, her attitude did a complete 180. Back when he was working his corporate job, or even when he was unemployed at home, she used to tell me not to worry about feeding him and to just take care of my own health. Now, it was, did you make sure Kevin had a good breakfast? Of course, Mom. I always make him breakfast. I see all those vitamin commercials on TV. You should buy him some of those. A parent worrying about their child is natural, so I could handle that with a cheerful response. But things got worse. Before, knowing that both Kevin and I worked, she rarely asked us to visit. But as soon as Kevin started making good money, she began complaining about how little we came to see them. Both of us only had one day off a week, and Kevin often worked on his, so we barely had any downtime. But I think she started to believe I was living off her son's success, because she started nagging me in ways she never had before, making unreasonable demands even though she knew our situation. Your mom wants us to come over. Should we go this weekend? I asked Kevin. Yeah, sure. Let's do that. So I told her we'd be there, and I packed a bag the night before. But on the morning of, Kevin announced he couldn't go because something came up with work. What do you mean? You said you had the day off. An important client issue came up. What can I do? I wanted to see Mom and Dad too, but I need you to understand. Here are the car keys. I'll transfer some money to your account for you to give them as a gift. You know Mom likes getting cash in a nice card, so don't forget to pick one up on the way. And with that, he rushed out the door. I had already told his parents we were coming, and Kevin had practically begged me to go alone, so I set off by myself. I was about 20 minutes from their house in Naperville when I called my mother-in-law to let her know Kevin had a work emergency, and I was coming alone. She said it was fine. As I was passing a Target, I asked if she needed anything. Oh, could you pick up some paper towels and a box of rubber gloves? She asked. Sure, no problem. I arrived with the items she'd requested and went inside. My father-in-law wasn't there. My mother-in-law saw me and said, I've set the table. Let's eat. Okay. I assumed she had prepared a meal for my arrival, but when I walked into the kitchen, I saw a plate on the table with nothing but some cold, day-old rice and a few slices of sour kimchi from a jar. I was so stunned I almost laughed out loud. After all her complaining about us not visiting, this was my welcome? Not just a simple meal, but literally just kimchi? I was speechless. But what made it even more absurd was that, right next to the table, I saw a large prime rib roast sitting in a pan, clearly marinating. As my eyes fixed on it, she noticed and quickly covered it up. Oh, this? I was going to roast this for Kevin this morning. Well, I guess I'll just have to freeze it now. I had called her before I arrived and explicitly told her I was coming alone. If she didn't intend to serve me the roast, shouldn't she have put it away before I got there? Why show it to me? Make a comment like that, and then hide it. It felt like she was deliberately saying, this isn't for you. Don't even think about it. I was so insulted and disgusted that I lost my appetite completely. I told her I wasn't hungry and didn't eat. Suit yourself, she said, then sat down, poured some water over her own cold rice, and ate it with the kimchi. I stayed for about an hour, gave her the card with the money Kevin had sent, and left. The entire drive back to Chicago, I was seething. The weekend traffic was building up, and my frustration grew. Why on earth did she insist I come? Of course, I have a mouth. I could have asked her for some of the roast. But when I did, she'd said it would take too long to cook, and I should just eat what was already prepared. Her saying she would freeze it again made it crystal clear she had no intention of ever sharing it with me. When I got home and opened the door, the first thing I saw was Kevin sprawled on the couch, watching TV. What are you doing here? I thought you were busy with work. Oh, It finished up earlier than I expected, so I came straight home. Why are you back so soon? You just left. I told him exactly what had happened at his parents' house. I was curious to see his reaction. So what? It's not a big deal, he said. You really just came home without eating? You probably embarrassed Mom. Not a big deal? Are you serious? Yeah. If there weren't any other side dishes, what was she supposed to do? It's not like she has to cook a feast every time we visit. But she had a prime rib marinating for you. The second she realized I was alone, she said she'd have to freeze it and put it away. You just have to understand, Emily. Mom's old-fashioned. She has this idea that you only serve big meat dishes when the man of the house is around. It's just how people from her generation are. You can't get all offended and storm out. That's just rude. My mother-in-law isn't even that old. And even if she were, does that mean daughters-in-law don't get to eat meat? She was a woman, a daughter-in-law herself once. I couldn't for the life of me understand how she could be so cruel. And here was my husband acting like it was no big deal. It was infuriating. Suppressing my rage, I looked him straight in the eye. Has my mom ever served you cold rice? My mom is old, too. But has she ever put a plate with just kimchi in front of you and told you to eat? When she knows we're coming, she marinates meat and makes sure both her daughter and her son-in-law can enjoy it. Has she ever hidden food from you so only I could eat it? No, she hasn't. Only then did it seem to dawn on him that something was wrong. He apologized. In his infinite cluelessness, he then offered to call his mother right away and tell her never to serve me cold rice and kimchi again. I had to stop him. After that, whenever we visited his parents, his mother never made me feel unwelcome with food again, so I suspected Kevin had said something to her privately. I believe that discriminating against someone with food is one of the lowest things a person can do. But since it stopped, I let it go and didn't bring it up again. But then, it wasn't about the food anymore. My mother-in-law was overjoyed, basking in the late-in-life luxury her successful son provided. And she began to openly disrespect me. Kevin had a 4-year college degree. I had only graduated from high school. His family had always known this. Before and after our marriage, they had never said a word about my education. But that changed when they started comparing my business to Kevin's. Suddenly, the woman who never visited because we were too busy working started showing up at our apartment constantly. She'd arrive without calling and stay for a week at a time. Ugh, what is this for dinner? And don't you ever clean this place? I do clean, Mom. Really? Look, she ran a finger along a shelf. Dust? You know what, Emily? You should just quit your job and be a housewife. You're not making great money, and you're not a great homemaker. If you can't be good at both, you should at least excel at one. My son had never run a business in his life. You've been doing it for much longer, but look at the money he's making now. It's several times what you earn. Do you know why that is? It's the difference between being educated and not being educated. In business, you have to meet people. Do you think introducing yourself as a high school graduate carries the same weight as saying you're a college graduate who left the corporate world to start your own company? It doesn't. I admitted that Kevin was making more money than I was. At that point, we could have lived comfortably without my income at all. She had never been overly warm, but she had never been this openly contemptuous either. It all started the moment Kevin's business took off. The more successful her son became, the higher her own pedestal grew. I could have tried to brush it off as a mother's pride, but Kevin was just as bad. You need to step up your game. Emily, what are you talking about? I mean, you should be working harder to earn as much as I do. We're both business owners, but the income gap between us is huge. We're in completely different industries. So, maybe you should switch industries. A lot of our suppliers have female CEOs, but they all have college degrees. Tell you what, I'll support you. Why don't you go back to school? If you can get into any decent 4-year college, I'll pay your tuition for all 4 years. It wasn't an empty boast. He was making enough money to do it, so I couldn't argue. But it didn't feel good. This was the same man who once said it didn't matter that I didn't go to college. Now, every conversation was about my lack of a degree, about how he realized in the business world that a college education was essential. He even asked me if I ever felt I hit a wall when I met people because of my education. Naturally, we fought whenever he disrespected me like this. Even with my patience, hearing the same insults over and over was too much. I told him that his attitude was something that would get him scorned anywhere, not just by me, and that he needed to watch his mouth. But it never stuck. He'd be sorry for a day, and then it would be back to the same thing. Then, just as quickly as it had risen, Kevin's business began to crumble. Unlike my business, which brought in a steady, predictable income each month, Kevin's had wild fluctuations. The man who used to come home grinning from ear to ear started walking in with a permanent scowl on his face. When I asked what was wrong, he wouldn't tell me, just lashing out with irritation. Did something bad happen at work? No. Then what is it? You look terrible. I said, it's nothing. Why do you keep asking? His constant anger made it impossible to talk to him, so I just assumed he was having a bad day. But those days became more and more frequent. One night, he didn't come home at all and didn't answer his phone. I drove to his office. The lights were off, but the door was unlocked. I went inside and found him asleep on the couch, covered with a blanket. What are you doing here? You're here. You didn't answer my calls. You didn't come home. What are you doing sleeping here? He couldn't look me in the eye and mumbled his answers. I knew something was seriously wrong and kept pressing him. I can't get in touch with Mike. What do you mean? Isn't he your partner? For the last month. He's been talking about wanting to try a different business. I thought it was just talk, but he kept saying he wanted to pull his investment out. I told him he couldn't do that. Then, 2 weeks ago, he said he had an urgent expense and just needed the money for a month, promising he'd put it right back. So, he took it. When they started, I knew Kevin and his partner, Mike, had split the initial investment 50/50 and had been dividing the profits equally. My income was steady, but Kevin's was irregular. Some months were great, others not so much. Their revenue had been declining, but he said it wasn't at a critical level yet. Now, he was panicking because Mike had withdrawn a large sum directly from the account where their client payments were deposited. A few days later, a much bigger problem emerged. Because of Mike's previous business experience, Kevin had entrusted him with all the paperwork and administrative duties. He never checked anything himself. That was his fatal mistake. As the business went downhill, the mounting debt became entirely Kevin's problem. Mike had been quietly organizing the legal documents for months, which is why he'd urgently withdrawn the cash. We tracked Mike down, but it was useless. He had structured everything to be legally sound, leaving Kevin to deal with the failing business on his own. After that, Kevin started drinking heavily. On the nights he didn't come home, he slept at the office. I had to go and drag him home more times than I can count. To be honest, I resented him deeply. When he was successful, he was arrogant, stayed out all night, and looked down on me. A part of me thought, serves you right. But seeing him completely fall apart, either drunk or weeping when sober, I started to feel a growing sense of dread. My fears were confirmed when I went to the office to get him and ran into an employee who had recently quit. Oh, hi, Emily. Hi. I thought you'd left the company. What are you doing here? I just had a few personal things to pick up. But, you should know, Kevin doesn't seem okay. I've seen a lot of guys whose businesses failed go to a dark place. You should really keep a close eye on him. I could see it too. As much as I wanted to let him ruin his own health with alcohol and drown in debt, I was scared. I realized I had to help him wrap up the business as quickly as possible and get him away from the bottle. From that day on, the calls from bartenders became a regular occurrence. I'd have to go to a bar and find him passed out, unable to even stand. Fearing he would truly hit rock bottom, I started consulting with other business owners I knew and began the process of liquidating his company. There was one stroke of luck. Out of their several clients, a few hadn't yet paid their recent invoices. It turned out Mike had contacted them, claiming an emergency and asking them to pay him directly. But the clients felt something was off and insisted on depositing the money into the official company account, using various excuses to delay payment. Thanks to their instincts, that money didn't end up in Mike's hands. So, I collected the outstanding payments, sold off the office furniture, and liquidated the remaining inventory in the warehouse. With that, Kevin's business was mostly settled. There was a small amount of debt left, but it was a manageable sum that I could pay off myself. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief that we had managed to contain the damage. Emily, thank you. If you're thankful, then promise me you'll never drink like that again. I promise. I'll never touch alcohol again. I swear. Should I write it down? What's the point of writing it down if you're just going to break the promise? I'm sick of dealing with your drinking. I mean it. Kevin's health had already suffered from the alcohol, and he agreed to stay home and rest while he started looking for a new corporate job. His business had failed, but mine was still doing well. I had never aimed to make a fortune overnight. I wanted a steady, sustainable income, and I had achieved that. Over the years, my client base had grown. I'd hired 2 more employees, and I'd even moved to a bigger office. So, Kevin began to rely on me, and we settled into this new reality. With my mother's birthday approaching, I started planning to send my parents on a special vacation. Of course, I discussed it with Kevin. Of course you should. It's your money. You earned it. Who am I to say yes or no? You do what you think is best. I just feel bad that I can't contribute anything. For years, even before we were married, I had been saving up to do something truly special for my parents. I was a little short, but with a bit more from my regular income, it was more than enough. After the stress of Kevin's business failure, it felt like our lives were slowly returning to normal. I was hopeful. But then, all hell broke loose with his family. I only had one day off a week, Thursday. Kevin, meanwhile, paid lip service to looking for a job but was effectively unemployed, sitting at home all day. And he wasn't doing any housework. As soon as I left, he would play video games, order takeout, and take long naps. He had asked me not to tell his parents about his business failing, saying he'd tell them himself once he found a new job, so they wouldn't worry. I agreed, but watching him do nothing all day drove me crazy. One afternoon at work, my mother-in-law called. I had a client with me, but her voice was so loud that everyone in my office turned to look. Is it true? I'm sorry. What are you talking about? I just got off the phone with Kevin. He said you're sending your parents on a trip? Yes. Apparently, Kevin had told her. I confirmed it was true, but I couldn't understand why she was so furious. How could you do this? Mom, I have a client here right now. Can I please call you back in a little bit? Dealing with the client was my priority, so I ended the call. But the moment I put my phone in my pocket, it started vibrating nonstop. My mother-in-law, still thinking her son was a successful entrepreneur, assumed that any money I spent on my family was money he had earned. That evening after work, I called her back and explained that it was my money, so she didn't need to worry about it. She didn't believe me and ended up saying things she never should have. It had been an incredibly busy day. I hadn't even had time to eat, and I was so exhausted that all I wanted to do was go home, collapse into bed, and sleep. But when I walked in, the apartment was a complete disaster. Even though we had no children, I was furious. I went to the spare room and saw Kevin, headphones on, completely absorbed in a video game. For a split second, I considered smashing the monitor, but I just slammed the door and walked out. Just then, my mother-in-law called again. Why haven't you been answering my calls? I was busy. Busy? Are you busier than my son? No matter how busy he is, he always picks up when I call. I didn't have the energy to argue, so I just listened as she continued her tirade. How much money did you send your parents last month? I don't send them money. Don't you lie to me. Listen to me carefully. If you spend 1 more cent on your family, you know what will happen, right? What? You'll be divorced. Divorced from my son. She spat out her threat and hung up. I was dumbfounded. I didn't know whether to storm in and confront Kevin or just scream. But the thought of even looking at his face, oblivious in his gaming world, was more than I could bear. So I just went to bed. A few days later, I went ahead with the plan and sent my parents on their trip. It wasn't just me. My brother and I had planned it together for a while, so it wasn't a huge expense on my part. But my mother-in-law couldn't leave it alone. She must have been calling Kevin constantly to check, and he, like a fool, told her everything. Eventually, she showed up at our apartment. My father-in-law was a quiet, reserved man, but she was the complete opposite. When she was angry, she flew into a rage without bothering to understand the situation, and what I saw that day was the worst I had ever witnessed. It was a Thursday, my one day off. Kevin, of course, had been a homebody for months. When his mother arrived, she was about to learn the whole truth. She stormed in early that morning, but Kevin was still in the middle of a gaming session. To be precise, he had started the night before and had been playing all night long. He had told me not to worry about making him dinner, and the evidence was a pile of greasy takeout containers on his desk. I was in the kitchen, slowly starting to make some breakfast, enjoying my rare day of rest. It's this late, and you're only just starting to make breakfast? Mom? What are you doing here so early? Is there a reason I can't be here? Did my son leave for work without eating? He said he wasn't hungry. I lived with him his whole life, and he never once skipped breakfast. What do you mean he wasn't hungry? She marched straight to our balcony. It was morning, so I had the curtains open, which meant the pile of recycling was in plain sight. Our building only collected recycling on Saturdays and Sundays, so we kept it on the balcony. But ever since Kevin had been home, The amount of trash we generated in a week was staggering. Seeing it, she was horrified and immediately launched into a lecture about my housekeeping skills. She then declared she couldn't stand her son living in such a filthy place, grabbed a huge bag filled with cans and plastic containers, and started dragging it into the living room. "What are you doing?" "I'm taking this home to throw it out for you. A house needs to be clean. What is this mess? Just because you work doesn't mean you can neglect your home." I grabbed her by the arm, led her to the spare room, and threw open the door. "What on earth? If you're going to take out the trash, take the trash from in here, too." The spare room, where Kevin was also filled with garbage. My mother-in-law was shocked by the state of the room, and even more shocked to see her son sitting there, playing a video game. "Kevin, what are you doing here? Didn't you go to work today?" "Mom, why are you here without calling?" "Answer my question. What is going on with you? And what is this pigsty?" "Mother," I said, my voice cold and steady, "your brilliant son's business went bankrupt, and he's been unemployed for months. He was worried you'd be upset, so he said he'd tell you himself later. So, I've been pretending I didn't know. But you've gone too far. Let me ask you, what is this? A child wouldn't make a mess like this. For the past week, I've been so busy at work I've been lucky to get 5 hours of sleep a night. I thought the unemployed person in this house should be doing the chores. But all he does is agree and then do nothing. I never forced him, so I come home from work and do the cleaning, the laundry, the cooking, and the dishes. So please, do not interfere with my housekeeping, and in the future, do not show up here unannounced." For so long, whenever she called and infuriated me, I just bit my tongue and said, "Okay." But that day, the anger boiled over, and I said everything I needed to say. In response, a spoon came flying from the dining table. Then came her words. "So, a man has a setback and takes a break from work, and you think you can lord your money over him? Is that it?" If Kevin had stayed silent, I might have blamed it all on his mother's abrasive personality and left it at that. But he, standing right next to her, added fuel to the fire. "I knew I'd get an earful for this," he muttered, clicking his tongue. Something inside me snapped. The thought of spending the rest of my life supporting a man who only caused trouble and never took my side was horrifying. All this time, I had been tiptoeing around him, treating him like a fragile child, worried he might do something drastic. But looking at him now, he seemed perfectly fine. I realized if I didn't end it now, I'd be stuck forever. "That's it, Kevin. I can't do this anymore. Let's get a divorce. Now, take your mother and get out of my house." At those words, my mother-in-law slapped me across the face. And Kevin, who witnessed the whole thing, just stood there, blinking. "I'm giving you the divorce you wanted so badly." I shouted at her. "What are you talking about? Did I say I wanted a divorce?" She shot back. "Why do I need your permission to send my own parents on a trip? I told you countless times that not $1 of Kevin's money was used, but you refused to listen. If sending them on a trip is grounds for divorce, then what about all the money Kevin gave you behind my back? You're the one who said it. First, it was, if you spend a penny on your family, it's divorce. Then it was, if you send your parents on that trip, it's definitely divorce. So, fine, as you wish. We're getting a divorce." Kevin finally seemed to grasp the severity of the situation and started trying to do damage control. But it was too late. "Emily, what's wrong? Do we have to take it this far? Have you ever known me to make empty threats? I have tolerated so much. I've given you so many chances. I know. Just calm down. If you know, then take your mother and get out. Now. Do you think you're the only one with parents? I have parents too. A mother and a father." That day, Kevin finally managed to get his mother out of the house. He didn't return until after sunset. I assume he drove her back to Naperville, and they had a long talk. In the meantime, my fury only grew. After they left, my mom called from her trip. I tried my best to sound cheerful, but it turned out my mother-in-law had called her. "What? What's going on, honey?" "It's nothing, Mom. Don't worry about what she said. Just enjoy the trip with Dad, okay?" My mother-in-law had told my mom that she was on vacation using her son's money, and that she should either come home immediately or pay him back. My mom, enjoying her trip, was blindsided by the call and called me worried. When Kevin finally came home late that night, he said, "I told Mom everything. I told her how much you've been struggling because of me." "Good. It's about time she knew. I'm so sorry, Emily. I promise, I will never let something like this happen again. Mom won't come here without calling anymore, either." I don't want to see her again. Let's get a divorce. Why are you doing this? It was just something Mom said in anger. Is divorce a joke to you? She's much older than me, and even she throws that word around so casually. I'm done. I'm done living with you. Kevin seemed desperate to stop the divorce at any cost. He suddenly started talking about how hard his business failure had been on him, probably thinking I'd feel sorry for him again. But a man who was truly devastated by his failure wouldn't have been sitting at home, ordering takeout and playing video games all day. I ignored everything he said. His mother called too. I know you've had a hard time because of my son. I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. But she never once mentioned or apologized for slapping me. I just said I wanted a divorce and tried to hang up, but she kept trying to placate me, which only made me more disgusted. If we had just signed the papers and gone our separate ways then, we could have avoided the ugliest part of this story. But my mother-in-law just had to take it one step further. After that day, I stopped answering her calls and stopped speaking to Kevin at home. Since he refused to agree to a divorce, I started the legal proceedings. The immense stress and overwork had taken a toll on me, and I ended up having to see a doctor. I decided to take the day off from my office. I went to my appointment and came home to find that my jewelry box, which I kept under my bed, was gone. I didn't notice it right away. I rarely wear jewelry, so I had no reason to look for it. It was only after I'd eaten lunch, done some laundry, and started vacuuming that I realized it was missing. The apartment looked exactly as I had left it that morning, except for the missing box. If it had been a burglar, there would have been signs of a search, things tossed around. I frantically searched the entire apartment, but it was nowhere. I rushed down to ask the security guard in the lobby, but he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. I went to the management office, but they said I needed a police officer present to view the security footage. I filed a report, and the police went to review the CCTV tapes. They told me it could take a while because of all the residents coming and going, but it turned out that during the time I was at the doctor's office that morning, only 3 people had used the elevator to my floor: a delivery driver, a neighbor from down the hall, and a middle-aged woman. And of those 3, only one person had gotten off on my floor, my mother-in-law. To make matters worse, Kevin had been out that day, so the timing was perfect. She must have thought the apartment was empty. On the camera, she was seen entering the elevator carrying an empty black plastic bag. That's what made the police suspicious. I called her immediately. I told her if she returned it, I would drop the matter quietly. I just wanted the divorce to be over and didn't want to make things more complicated. She flew into a rage. Just because we're on bad terms, you're accusing me of being a thief? How dare you? Unaware that she was caught on camera, she insisted she knew nothing about it. I'll show you what happens when you falsely accuse an innocent person, she screamed. So that day, I pressed charges. When his business failed and he was at his lowest, Kevin had said he was grateful that I helped him get back on his feet and had put the title of our apartment solely in my name. That meant his mother entering my home without permission constituted breaking and entering. Add theft to that, and she was facing serious charges. I didn't want to do this. The box contained a simple gold key pendant she had given me for our wedding, but the rest was my own jewelry, necklaces and rings I wore occasionally, and most importantly, a necklace my mother had given me. It was a one-of-a-kind custom design that my mom had commissioned just for me. It was irreplaceable. She could keep the gold key, but I desperately wanted the rest back. The very next day, the woman who had threatened to teach me a lesson came to my apartment with my father-in-law, carrying my jewelry. Kevin, who already knew what was happening, had initially told me not to suspect his mother. But when he knew for sure she was the thief, he immediately grabbed her by the throat. "Check if everything is here," my father-in-law said, looking utterly ashamed. "Please forgive her. I have no words to express how sorry I am." My mother-in-law, however, insisted to the very end that she hadn't stolen anything. My father-in-law explained that after my call, he had searched their house, but found nothing, and for a moment, he thought I was mistaken. But then, he said he had a gut feeling. He went into the laundry room and reached deep inside the washing machine, where my mother-in-law kept a small bag of delicates. He found my jewelry box hidden there. He said he confronted her, asking her if she had no shame as a parent. There was a reason for his intense reaction. Years ago, my mother-in-law had co-signed a loan for a friend who defaulted, causing a huge financial crisis for their family. My father-in-law had forgiven her and had never once brought it up again in all their years together. But this time, he brought it up and threatened to divorce her. In response, she had a fit, saying she couldn't live with him if he was going to suspect her. My father-in-law then spent the day going to every pawn shop and jeweler in their area. He even called Kevin and told him to search their house again, but they found nothing. Kevin came back to my place, convinced his mother was innocent. But my father-in-law, a few moments later, discovered it in the washing machine. When he demanded to know why, she confessed. He had given her a credit card with a set limit, which she had exceeded. Before, when Kevin's business was booming, she could just ask him for money and he'd send it immediately. But now that he was broke, she couldn't pay her bill. So she had borrowed money from a payday loan company, $2,000. She had stolen my jewelry in a panic to pay off that debt. I was speechless. That day, as my husband held his mother by the throat and my father-in-law stood before me in tears, begging for my forgiveness, I felt a wave of conflict. My father-in-law had always treated me with respect and warmth. Seeing him so broken made me hesitate. So, instead of pursuing the police investigation, I demanded financial compensation for the emotional distress and the physical assault of her slapping me. And I proceeded with the divorce. After everything that had happened, my father-in-law could no longer argue against it. During the divorce proceedings, another one of Kevin's hidden debts came to light. I was terrified I might be responsible for it, but thankfully, since it was incurred without my knowledge, the court ruled that I was not obligated to pay it. And so, Kevin and I were divorced. It wasn't an easy process, but I finally saw it through. He packed his things and moved back in with his parents. I heard that my ex-mother-in-law, shamed by what she'd done, was working multiple jobs to pay off her debts. My ex-husband was doing the same. My ex-father-in-law's heart was broken, but it seemed he had chosen to keep his family together, however fractured. After the divorce, I blocked all their numbers. But one day, my ex-husband showed up at my door. I know you don't want to talk, but I couldn't reach you by phone. What is it? Do you have any of my mail? I handed him a stack of letters I had set aside. From now on, I said, I don't want to see your face again. It's been a while. Do you really have to be like that? Do you want me to slap you? The day your mother brought back my jewelry, I wanted to slap you just as hard as she slapped me. I only held back out of respect for your father. Do you understand? So don't ever come back here. Go change your address. Now. Come on, it's been so long. Let's just have a cup of coffee. You want coffee? Fine. Wait here. I'll make you a nice, hot cup and pour it right on your face. Okay. I'm leaving. I'm going. He knew I wasn't bluffing, so he turned and left in a hurry. He never contacted me or showed up again. He probably didn't have the time. He'd need to work 2 or 3 jobs just to keep up with his debts. Since the divorce, I've been living well, feeling a sense of freedom I hadn't realized I was missing. My business is still doing fine. It's not growing by leaps and bounds, but it's not declining either. It's stable, and I'm content with that. Because of my ex-husband, I find it hard to trust people easily, but I know that we'll heal with time. I want to believe the old saying. In the end, good people are surrounded by good people. And that's my story. Thank you for listening.